So you want to play Pygmalion in the Bazaar? Well, having made well over 100 videos at this point, and having played in the last couple of playtests, I now want to share everything I've learned about Pygmalion with you.
You should know, I'm a bit of a legend on Pelago.
Hello, my name is Artificer, but you can call me Greg, and I really like Pygmalion. He is my most played hero of the most recent test, and despite how one-dimensional he might seem, I actually enjoy the variety of ways he can play the game, thanks to his immense wealth. First things first, you'll need to know what playstyles are immediately available to you when jumping into a Pygmalion run. You can of course play any type of build on any hero, and you can even buy an entire board of items that belong to a different hero. But most of the time you'll be looking to play a number of styles based on the hero you picked. For Pygmalion, most of his items and builds involve generating a lot of money to become very hard to kill. That can be through shielding, healing, or just having a lot of maximum health. But regardless, you'll likely need to be buying and selling items regularly to either generate the gold required to buy some extremely expensive items, or trigger passive effects to scale your tankiness. You can combo some of those builds with items that deal damage based on how tanky you are, so don't worry, they're not entirely passive all the time. But that's not the extent of Pygmalion's damage options. He can also run some very fast weapon builds, and go for some crazy scaling damage items too. Pygmalion's general utility is the lowest of our current heroes though, almost entirely being focused on money and survivability. Tip number 2 is to make sure you're getting the most out of what Pygmalion is best at, scaling. And it isn't quite as easy as it seems. A lot of Pygmalion's scaling, as I mentioned, revolves around buying and selling a lot of items. That could be to empower a dog which gains damage per item, generate max HP through a tea set or lemonade stand, or even give value to a pawn shop to get a huge amount of maximum health. Because of this, you'll want to spend a lot of time each day going through your board and chest, selling what you don't need, and making sure the items you do need are in their relevant positions. To maximize Pygmalion, you need to effectively manage your storage chest and board, but if you can do this, the sky is the limit. Let me give you a couple of examples. Firstly, these guides are primarily based on the playtest, which are incredibly similar to the beta version, with one minor difference. Items in your chest did nothing the last time we played, and since then we have seen in some of the recent content, as well as actually playing the game, that items like Vanessa's Wanted poster do trigger in your chest, but to a lesser extent. Pay close attention to your scaling items like lemonade stand, cash register, business card and more, making sure they are in the correct position, and if you need them on your board, to swap them in. The other thing you need to look out for is your space. If you have a cash register and piggles and you're going into a fight that you win, if you don't have any spare slots, you're going to lose 2 small items that you could have spent scaling your build. Sometimes you are not going to be able to avoid this, but as much as possible, make sure you're not wasting any of these generated token items. Speaking of token items, Pygmalion is a special hero because there are some encounters that are strictly a lot better when Pygmalion visits them over other heroes. These are events like the eating contest, gumball machine, or even just the look for spare change freebie. Because all of these events generate a rather large amount of small token items. Pygmalion can get double the effectiveness out of these thanks to a number of the aforementioned items, look at you lemonade stand and friends, using them not only for the original benefit that other heroes would be going to this event for, but also continuing to scale his build. This also works for certain items like the safe, pinata, and if you're lucky enough, items like fishing net or chum from Vanessa for example. Always be keeping an eye out for any item or event that generates small items if you're running a fairly normal scaling Pygmalion build. Tip number 4 is going against everything I've been saying about the Bazaar for 4 or more years now, and that is to not pivot, at least some way through the game. That was hyperbolic of course, I don't mean you should never swap anything on Pygmalion, but hear me out. By the time you hit day 6 or 7 with Pygmalion, you have likely found yourself in some sort of build. Maybe you have a lemonade stand and you're scaling your maximum HP, or you had a dog and you were scaling its damage, or perhaps you are running a small weapon build and you have a number of piggles boosting damage. At this point, if you were to hard swap into a completely different build, you would not go much further, or at least it would be very hard for you to. That's because Pygmalion is balanced under the assumption you have been scaling your type of build for days, and if you lose all of that to swap to something else, it can really hurt you. This doesn't mean you just sit on your build though. If you aren't ramping health quickly enough with lemonade stand, then sure, sell it. But swap it for something that can utilize the maximum health you have created. Maybe a damaging build that scales over time to become crazy like an Atlas stone while the enemy can't take you out. Perhaps you have a damage build and you've been scaling your dog for ages, but you just can't find the upgrade and it's starting to fall off. That's fine. You can look for the blue llama, which keeps changing its name, and utilize the cash register you have to scale that instead. Or if you have the cash register, gumball machine, and the loop, so you are mega invested in small item generation, it doesn't matter what scaling item you swap into, your investment is in your scaling machine in this example, so get rid of that dog and buy yourself a pawn shop if you see it. My point is, you just need to realize what you have invested in with Pygmalien, and stick with that bit of your build as best you can. Last but not least is a warning. Pygmalien, more than any other hero, can run into some horrendous counters. This has supposedly gotten better, but the point will remain, and I'll even give a very recent example of this still happening. Because Pygmalien likes to be very tanky, with few damaging items, and because Pygmalien has more great large items than any other hero, conditions like freeze, slow, and even poison can be very difficult for him to deal with. If you have 3 large items and 1 small item, let's say lemonade stand, pawn shop, double whammy, and succulents, right? A very standard big health Pygmalien build. If the enemy can produce 4 freezes per second, your entire board is entirely locked out. Or at least very nearly locked out, depending on changes they make to freeze in the future. Even if they have slow instead of freeze, your entire build is running at half speed. This can cripple an otherwise unkillable Pygmalien. And then we have the recent example, Vanessa's new Dam. This thing used to freeze, and now it straight up deletes 3 of your items. With a bit of bad luck, you only have 1 small item left. You have lost. Then we have the poison and ramping damage builds. If you're running a purely tank Pygmalien, so no spiky shield or double whammy, you will win a lot, you'll do very well. But the second you see a ramping damage build, you are done. They will scale in damage far more quickly than the Sandstorm, and unless you have 100,000 health, my money is on them to win. And if you're running a massive shielding build, be careful about any Vanessa or Dooley matches. They both have good viable poison builds, and poison completely ignores shielding, so you'll die very quickly, with a very impressive shield that no one gives a shit about. All that being said, this is the Bazaar. Pygmalien has ways around these builds, I just want you to be conscious of them as you play. And that concludes our top tips for Pygmalien. For other guides, gameplays, and more, you know what to do.